So this video is about how to initialize the timer, because although it's not hard, it is a little different than what we're used to. So to begin with, the function doesn't look too different than normal. Timer0, initialize, and then there's two parameters that we need to pass into this function. So here's where things get a little different. The first parameter, t0 control 0, is actually a number that is going to set two things at once. So it's just one number that we pass into the function, but it will actually set two different things. Likewise, t0 control 1 is a number that's going to set three different things for us. So how does this work? These are the two things that t0 control 0 is going to set for us. It's going to set whether we're using an 8-bit or a 16-bit mode timer, and it's also going to set the timer's post-scalar value. Likewise, t0 control 1 sets three different things for us. It sets what the timer's pre-scalar value is going to be, it sets our synchronization mode, and it sets the clock source. Now before I demonstrate exactly how this works, I'm going to open up one of the files that you were given on the Moodle website. So this is the tmr0.h file. And in here, as you scroll down, you'll notice that there's a whole bunch of constants that have been defined. So there's a whole bunch of constants here, and they all represent numbers. So here's the different numbers, and here's the constants that have been defined to equal those numbers. So up here, we've got constants for 8-bit or 16-bit timer, and down here, we've got a whole bunch of constants for the post-scalar. So let me go back to my original document now. Say, for example, that you wanted to set the timer to be a 16-bit mode timer. So there's a value associated with it. This is that number in binary. Likewise, if you want to define your post-scalar to be a 4 times post-scalar, again, there's a number that's associated with it. Now the t0 control 0 variable is going to be these two numbers ANDed together. Let me demonstrate. Here are those two numbers, and if you AND them together, so if you do a bitwise AND operation on them, then you wind up with this value. And this is the number that needs to go into that initialization for the t0 control 0. Of course, it would be a bit of a pain to have to do this bitwise AND operation every time to figure out what your parameter should be, which is why those constants were defined, because you don't have to actually do a bitwise AND operation. You could just AND those two constants together, and then this could be your first parameter in the timer initialization. We're also going to do this same procedure for the second parameter in the initialization. So for t0 control 1, let's say that we want our prescalar to be a 2 to the 9 prescalar. Again, there's a number associated with setting that. And let's say that we want our synchronization mode to be set to synchronous. That's the one you should use most of the time when you're using the microchip's internal clock, which is our third setting. We're also going to set the clock source to be the internal clock. In other words, the microchip's own internal clock is going to be what's driving the timer. So we've got these three numbers, and we could do a bitwise AND operation on all of them, but we don't need to. Because back in that tmr0.h file, if we scroll down a little more, we start seeing those constants as well. So there's one for the internal clock source, there's one for an external clock source. There's also one for asynchronous or synchronous mode, and there's a whole bunch for the prescalars. So for example, for t0 control 1, if we wanted specifically these settings, we can just AND three constants together like this. So the 2 to the 9 prescalar would be this constant, and it gets ANDed into the constant for the synchronous mode, and also ANDed into the constant for the internal clock source. So you would AND those three things together, and that means in the end, our initialization becomes this. Timer0, initialize, and then we've got two quantities ANDed together, separated by a comma here, and then three quantities ANDed together for the second parameter. So like I said, it's not hard to do this, but it is different than what we've been doing up to this point.